nothing. And then I got this family.
In 5 days.
We owe it to everyone we lost to take a stand.
We're the Avengers. We gotta finish this.
This is the fight of our lives.
Every journey has an end.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. I miss that giddy optimism.
Avengers Endgame. Rated PG-13. Everywhere Friday.
Hey guys, you're watching Pop Culture Galaxy Podcast. I'm Mark Bridge, and I'm here with Zach Worsner.
That's me.
And we're here to talk about Phase 2. We dealt with Phase 1 last week. Got into the nitty-gritty of how it all came to be and how Avengers sort of solidified the MCU proper. And now we're going to go into Phase 2, which had still a little bit of growing pains. That's because at the time, for most of Phase 2, I think for all of Phase 2, Marvel Studios had what they call a creative committee, which consisted of Michael Bendis, Joe Quesada, I want to say Alex Alonso, and another one. But basically, they are like the committee that kind of make sure that every movie kind of tied into each other. But because they are primarily comic book editors and writers, it could hamper some of the projects where it, you know, they're saying, oh, make sure it feels like it fits, instead of trying to get the directors to make their own product. But some products were able to escape the sort of creative committee drag down, and I think as we go forward, we'll see the breakdown of how it all went with Ike Perlmutter and Kevin Feige, and the sort of civil war that happened within Marvel.
Was Ike on the committee, or did he
No, he wasn't
support
on
it?
Yeah, pretty much. What happened was he kind of supported that whole movement and got kind of tied Kevin's hands in certain fields. Some in that he couldn't hire the directors he wanted, Patty Jenkins, anyone. He couldn't have the villain he wanted, Iron Man 3, where it was supposed to be a female villain. But some films were unscathed. Winter Soldier was one that wasn't really bothered with. They were able to pull that one off, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. But the movies that were affected, Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, and Avengers Age of Ultron, in some way got affected by the creative committee. And Kevin kind of played his part in that as well. But yeah, those films kind of got affected. To a little bit of extent, Ant-Man as well, which was the closer of Phase 2. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of all of those, I think we can just go back and... well, before I do that, I'm going to ask you, since we wrapped up Phase 1 last week, do you have a favorite film in Phase 1?
In Phase 1, it's got to be either Captain America or the Avengers.
Right, yeah.
I mean, the Avengers was such a, I know that there are complaints, and legitimate complaints, about Cap himself being a little bit misunderstood by Joss Whedon. There's a great feature on Screen Rant.
Right.
Now, I did not write it, but about how Joss just didn't get Cap.
Right.
And to the point, I'm not sure if it's in the article, but like Joss even came out after Age of Ultron and was just like, I don't know how to write Cap. He slipped through my fingers.
Wow.
And I think there's a little bit of that there. I think it's much less pronounced in Avengers 1, or at least you're able to get away with it,
right,
because he's just been unfrozen.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still got that shell shock.
Yeah, I think he was able to pull off Cap. Maybe he thought he could have did better, but that's all artists do. Like when they go back to their projects, they're like, man, I could have did that better. But a lot of sort of the speech pattern that you see going forward with Cap started, I would believe, in the first Avengers, and there was a lot of it in Age of Ultron, which we'll get to, where he had that sort of Captain America-esque speech that he would deliver, and I think he did a pretty decent job.
That stuff is definitely good. It's more in like he just doesn't fit into Joss's rapid fire interplay.
Yeah,
where he becomes much more of a punchline. I mean, language is a big, like, he fought in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
He's seen people get disintegrated by laser guns.
Right.
He's not gonna go, "Oh, you said a bad word, Tony."
Mm-hmm.
It's a little inconsistent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, The Avengers is such a great movie, so important, so rewatchable. I don't know how many times I've seen that movie. I'm of the opinion, even as we get into the divisive phase 2,
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think that any of them are misses. I think they're all hits.
Yeah.
I think some are bigger hits than others,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not like, oh, Thor: The Dark World sucks, or The Incredible Hulk, what a waste of time.
Yeah.
I really do. So far, 21 movies, 21 hits.
Yeah. To me, it was a toss up. Well, Avengers is it for me. It was the best one, but if I had to choose something to go up against, it would have been the first Iron Man movie, because it was such a surprise, such a shocker. It was such a character piece rather than just like a straight up like, oh, it's a comic book movie, so we gotta fill it with tons of action. Nah, they really sort of established that film, with Robert Downey sort of really selling Tony Stark to us, and that's how we fell in love with the MCU, and that was our window into the MCU. But I still give it to Avengers. Avengers was like a grand old time, man. It was a concert. I just loved it. But yeah,
that first big action scene in the first Iron Man, I don't think hot take, I don't know if anything has surpassed that in the MCU.
Right.
Of him going to, what's his name, Jensen's village.
Yeah.
And just killing all the terrorists there.
Yeah.
Like 2008 was a little bit of a different time, but that was such a cathartic moment for so many people.
Yeah.
It's like he's like a cowboy. You see all the bandits in town, is just like, I'm gonna kill those guys. It is so distinctly American, but it's got a visceral physical and visceral emotional impact.
Yeah.
That whole scene, blowing up the tanks and shooting everybody. It's very, very old timey. Like we said last week, it's these movies take these characters and put them in the real world, and then the real world is changed by the presence of these characters.
Yeah.
I think that's like the core of the MCU.
Yeah.
Is that it's set in the real world, even the cosmic movies.
Yeah. It managed to strike that balance that doesn't intimidate you. That's why everybody's in love with the MCU so far. But so that was phase 1. Now we're gonna jump into some phase 2 talk, starting with Iron Man 3. Now, I remember a long time ago, you and I had a conversation, I don't know if you remember this, where Iron Man 3 felt more like a epilogue to phase 2 than the beginning of epilogue to phase 1 than the beginning of phase 2. Which is ironic considering that phase 2 ends with a non-Avengers movie, which is Ant-Man, and it was just revealed by Kevin Feige that Spider-Man 2 is not the beginning. Spider-Man Far From Home is not the beginning of phase 4, but rather the end of phase 3. So, I guess, in some retrospect, you could actually say Iron Man 3 is the end of phase 1.
I think you could super easily make that conclusion and defend it. I think that is I think that's legitimate.
Yeah, so maybe who knows if they probably repackage the phases when they come out with the big gigantic box set, they might put Iron Man 3 back into, well, put it into phase 1. But yeah, so Iron Man 3, written and directed by Shane Black, whose writing credits include, but not limited to, the Lethal Weapon movies. All 4. Imagine that, right? He came out for all 4.
Well, I think he just had story credit or even just character credit on 3 and 4.
Really? You sure?
Yeah, because he wanted to do, like, he wasn't pleased at how part 2 came out.
Oh, okay.
His 2 would have been like a lot darker, which is really funny.
Unless I'm confusing the fact that it was Richard Donner who directed all.
Richard Donner directed all 4.
Yes.
But Shane wanted to kill off Riggs at the end of part 2.
Oh wow.
But then Warner Brothers and Richard Donner were like, well, we want to have more sequels.
Yeah.
Which is why Riggs makes a pretty miraculous comeback in like the last 90 seconds of that movie.
Yeah.
Spoilers for Lethal Weapon 2. But it's funny because that direction that the series eventually took is a little bit more in line with Shane's later work, even though he didn't work on those movies.
Yeah.
You know, it's always that his work is defined by that juxtaposition of just broad comedy and character-focused comedy with like deadly serious stakes and seriously high tension, violent situations. Man, I really like The Weapon.
And of course,
I really like Shane Black.
Yeah, he wrote one of my favorite films of the 90s, The Long Kiss Goodbye. I love that movie. I kind of wish they had made a sequel called Charlie Baltimore. Or maybe they could eventually make it a series of Charlie Baltimore, but I love that movie. What else did he do? Last Boy Scout? No, he didn't. He wrote it. Okay.
Last Action Hero.
Yes, Last Action Hero. Of course, I think one of his recent works was The Nice Guys. Was it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, The Nice Guys.
One of my favorites. Top 10.
Love that movie. One of his signature takes, I guess, is to set his movies during the Christmas. That's one of sort of Shane Black's signature aspect. And so Iron Man 3 came out in the dead of summer, but it was a Christmas movie.
I was thinking about why he sets his movies in Christmas, and I think he's talked about it here and there, but I don't remember what he said. But I was thinking about the themes of his movies and how the things that we think are sacred,
right,
are not sacred.
And
I think that setting a movie in Christmas is a way to relay that. Right. You know, Christmas is a special holiday, and he goes, "No, it's not. It's just lights." It's just lights and wearing red and green.
Right.
Just like how, I don't know, if you took a comic book villain who everyone's like, oh my god, this character is sacred, the Mandarin, I love him, he's amazing. And you go, he's not sacred.
Yeah.
Like, that approach. Like, I can definitely, we're going to get into it. I can understand if you don't like it, but I friggin' love it.
Yeah, so when Iron Man 1 came out, obviously, I don't think they wanted to jump into the Mandarin right away. But they did mention the 10 rings, which got us fans excited. It was like, oh, they're building up to Mandarin. Can't wait. Iron Man 2 came out and it's like, all right, they're still building, but let's not, I think one of the scenes, but if I didn't get it, but I guess they said it, that you did see a member of the 10 ring who gave Whiplash the passport to the Grand Prix. But I guess that was a member of the 10 ring. I didn't know that.
If it's some of that BS that like Kevin Feige tweeted that it was a member of the 10 rings, no.
Yeah.
No. I don't care what you tweeted. What's in the movie?
Yeah. So, still no Mandarin. So then Avengers came and it was like, all right, it introduced, Thor introduced pseudo magic. And then Avengers came with aliens and stuff. And so we figured this is the time now for Iron Man 3 to get his Joker, to get his Lex Luthor, or to get, basically he's his ultimate villain. And yes, his villain has 10 rings on and it's magic and whatnot. But I think the fans or the sort of casuals are pretty prepared for that type of entertainment, infusion. But we saw the first trailer, and I guess they were going for a real world aspect to Mandarin. But the way how Ben Kingsley played him in the trailer was like, oh, I see where they're going. Like, looks pretty cool. I guess they're going for a sort of Bane-esque inflection for Mandarin, where it's very applicable to sort of a real world Osama bin Laden. Okay, I can see it. I mean, we wish we got the 10 rings, but whatever. If they want to play it straight, let them play it straight. But then the movie came, and it's like, basically, I think they combined two storylines together. The Extremist storyline that was written by Warren Ellis, I think in 2006, 7, or one of those times. And the sort of, and I think, I forgot the name of the story, but it dealt with sort of him with the Mandarin and him confronting the Mandarin or whatever. It's kind of, I hated X-Men: The Last Stand because it tried to combine the Phoenix Saga and Joss Whedon's The Cure storyline in one, and it's like it didn't mesh well. So to me, that was one of the issues with this movie. Is like, okay, so they have the Extremist storyline, but then they're trying to do this Mandarin thing, and the Mandarin thing just fell by the wayside to service the Extremist storyline. Now, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Iron Man 3, we find out that that the Mandarin is an actor who's Trevor, what is his last name again? Trevor
Slattery.
Trevor Slattery. When that reveal came, I could feel the sort of depression in the audience. Like, oh, what? It's like all that tension you built in the first hour or so just like deflated, and it turns out that the Mandarin is a joke. It was like, what the hell is happening?
I know, it's so good.
What are you
all
doing?
All these people with their expectations, they're like, I know exactly what I'm going to see, and I'm so happy. And then it's not that.
No, but
it says, what do you think is going to happen? And it slaps it out of your hand. But, oh, do you like this ice cream? No, you don't get that ice cream. Slap. But then we've got this other thing, and we give you that other thing, and you take that other thing, and you go, wow, I didn't even know that I wanted this. And you can still be sore about the other thing, and if you're upset about that, then, like, fine, whatever, be upset about that. But, like, don't look at the thing that you wanted, because that movie already exists in your imagination. Like, why would they make that if it already exists in your imagination? It's like they're giving you something that is different, that is brand new, that is a game changer, that says this series can go anywhere.
But here's the thing, though. It's been done before.
What has?
In the whole bait and switch, like, oh, you think this is what the villain is going to look like? They did that already with Batman Begins. Ra's al Ghul, you thought it was Ken Watanabe, and it turns out, no, it's Henry Ducard. He's the real Ra's al Ghul, which they try to do here with Guy Pearce revealing, I'm the Mandarin. It's like, no, you're not.
He breathes fire. That makes him the Mandarin. Wait, does the Mandarin breathe fire?
No, he doesn't. He does.
Well, it was really cool.
Well, he has different elements in his ring. That's pretty much what you could say.
They should have gotten Ringo Starr to play.
But, so here's the thing. Why I was sort of upset. It's like, imagine taking the Joker in Batman and making him some ironic joke. You know what I mean? Like, he is not like you see in Tim Burton's Joker. Even though he's a gangster, he eventually turns him into the Joker that we think, that we sort of recognize in the comic books. And then the next time we see Joker in Christopher Nolan's movie, it's basically the Joker from the comic books with Heath Ledger's spin on it, but there's reflections of Joker in there. Say what you want about Jared Leto. I mean, yes, he played more of a pimp Joker, but it's still an anarchist. And then who else is? Well, Joaquin Phoenix is he's taking a turn at playing Joker, but again, he's bringing in some Joker inflections to the character. And I think even look at Superman. Even though it's divided on how what's his name? Mark, the dude that played Mark Zuckerberg. What's his name? Is it Jesse?
Yeah, that guy. Jesse Eisenberg.
Jesse Eisenberg. Because I keep confusing him with the other dude that was in.
Michael Cera?
Yes. I was trying to make sure I'm not getting the names incorrect. So Jesse Eisenberg, he had his version of Lex, but at least his version of Lex, the thing that he had in common with any other depiction of Lex was that he was he's a sociopath who has a god complex, pretty much, right? So each of those sort of characters got their bad guy. And then going into the MCU, Loki, Loki, the god of mischief, was able to be portrayed accurately by Tom Hiddleston. So you got that Loki, you know what I'm saying? And and the Red Skull, even though it's sad that Hugo Weaving didn't have a good time playing the character, he did a good job, you know what I mean? So why not give Iron Man, the guy who started it all for the MCU, his just villain, you know what I mean? His Mandarin, like, come on, man. It just felt...
Part of it, I think part of it is also that, a lot of these characters are not well known. Like,
right.
Red Skull, I know, I kind of sort of was aware of Red Skull before the movie.
Right.
Didn't know who Abomination was. Still don't know who the leader is. Never gonna find out.
We never.
Didn't know who Thanos was. Definitely did not know who the Mandarin was.
Right.
And I think that comic book people know who the Mandarin is.
Yeah.
They go, oh my god, the Mandarin, of course.
Yeah.
But, like, the vast viewing public, a lot of people.
Well, if you watch the cartoons in the 90s too, you'd also know who the Mandarin. But I guess
I watched some, but I watched like Spider-Man.
Right.
And I guess Iron Man was on that here and there.
Yeah.
But the Mandarin, I had no clue. I had no idea who. I knew that he was his big guy because in like the lead up, the marketing was like, he's his enemy from the comics, and I'm like, okay, fun, whatever. Let's see what happens. But the movies, it's funny. It's one of the early examples of the movie having that strong villain presence where up to this point they have been much more defined by their heroes and will continue to be as the movies go on with just a couple of exceptions.
Right.
Like Black Panther has a incredible villain, but we'll get to that later. The Mandarin is an overpowering force in the movie, especially in the beginning. It's all about Tony reacting to the villain as opposed to going through his arc, and then the villain is actually the catalyst of stuff in Iron Man 3 as opposed to in a lot of other MCU movies. He calls him out. He's oh, this is my address. You want to fight me? Come fight me. And then he goes, okay, I'm gonna go send some helicopters to fight you. I hope you don't throw a piano at one. And then he winds up stranded in the middle of nowhere. What is he, in Tennessee?
Right.
I think. And like that's so good. That's when he has that baggage of I am defeated. I lost. How am I gonna scrape a victory out of this? And that's where that part of the movie happens. But yeah, I mean, I definitely understand why people would get upset over the villain reveal. I think that it has to be taken with, yeah, but what about what it does do?
Right.
Because it's so easy to get mad at a movie for what it doesn't do. The stuff that you had in your head, however long you were building towards it, however long you've wanted to see it since you were a kid or whatever. But, what's actually in the movie, and does it work? And I think that it works so well.
Right.
When you finally meet Trevor Slattery and you find that he's just like a drug addicted dweeb watching soccer while surrounded by like prostitutes or something. That's great.
Yeah, it is like, I could see from a non-fan perspective why they would enjoy the movie. It is a well-made film by Shane Black, well written. I like the dynamic with, speaking of Lethal Weapon and sort of the dynamic between Riggs and Murtaugh. You get some of that with Tony and Rhodey, especially towards the end.
First one. It's definitely the first one where Rhodey is not a sidekick.
Yeah. So yeah, you definitely get that feeling, and but again, it's just with the Mandarin thing. And then the other thing that when you find out later, and this was a result of Ike sort of being the overlord of Marvel at the time, including Marvel Studios, which is now a separate entity. Him coming from a toy background and sort of going off, well, they don't buy toys with female characters. He figured the original idea was that Maya Hansen was going to be the Eldritch Killian role. Like, she was going to be the mastermind of it all. Like, the swerve with the Mandarin was still there in the original script, but instead of it being Guy Pearce's character, it would have been Maya Hansen. She would have been the
he would have been like the face, like Remington Steele.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that'd be cool.
That's another thing that I'm kind of like, because even though I was down about the Mandarin thing, I actually would have preferred to see the Maya Hansen twist. Which in the comic book, the Extremist storyline, she ended up being sort of like the bad guy. So I was, sad to hear that wasn't the thing. But Shane Black and team managed to carve out a good enough movie, I guess. It wasn't an abomination. Wasn't my favorite.
I also remember hearing that at the end, the fight was going to be Tony versus Killian, and Gwyneth Paltrow versus
Maya.
Killian's gorgeous redhead assassin.
Yeah.
Who in the final movie winds up getting killed in the small town.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
After she like super violently kills the sheriff.
And that movie teased us getting rescued, but it didn't. The rescue.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
That's Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts in the Iron Man suit. She has rescue, which I guess we will probably get in Endgame because of the leaked photos of her in the suit, a purple suit, but that could have been faked. I don't know.
And then Shane Black was like, let's rewrite the ending so that we kill off the ginger assassin earlier, and have Pepper do the finishing blow. And now knowing about what you were saying about Ike, that could be like his like little poke and like screw you towards the creative committee or Ike, whoever was in charge of that decision.
Yeah.
Of like, well, you want a big strong guy with dragon tattoos on his back instead of a girl. Well, we're gonna have him get killed by the girliest girl in this whole franchise, Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah.
But also I think he needs like a little bit of credit, Guy Pearce, for being really scary in that last act.
Yeah,
he's like ripped.
Yeah, he was. He hit with the dragon tattoos, I guess.
That's Mandarin-esque, is it? I mean, I don't know what Mandarin even looks like.
Well, he looked like Fu Manchu. That's why they were hesitant to.
You should have opened with that. I mean, I'm sure that they would have redesigned him.
Well, that's why I figured they went with the whole Middle Eastern sort of aesthetic that Ben Kingsley was bringing to the table. That's because they didn't want to offend, especially the fact that this was a huge release that they were doing simultaneously with China. They even had
a different
extra,
China edit.
the extra scenes shot for that. So I don't think they wanted to offend the Chinese by making him very Fu Manchu. But yeah, that's pretty much what Mandarin looks like.
Yeah, I mean, a Fu Manchu look would not have been acceptable at all. But like, I do get upset at the steps that these studios take to appease China.
Yeah.
Like, even though Suicide Squad is not a good movie, I love that they were just like, you're not gonna let us come out in China? Fine. Even though you find out later that like they were willing to retitle the movie, but China was just like, nah, there's no way, we're never gonna accept it. And so they were like, fine, whatever. And no one's gonna call that movie a bomb.
Yeah.
Deadpool. They were just like, oh, well, I don't know, you'd have to re-edit it. And Ryan Reynolds just like, fuck you, China.
Well,
it's pretty cool.
Now that it's under Disney banner, shit, I don't know. They'll probably have to be more mindful, I guess.
I think Disney might be smart enough to stick with what works and just let them play in their corner of the sandbox.
I mean, it's going to be released under the 20th Century Fox banner because they still have that intact. So.
Oh, they're keeping that?
Yeah. All right, so, that was Iron Man 3, but it seems this may be a creative committee thing or Ike thing, but later on they came out with the one-shot, All Hail the King, that revealed that there is a real Mandarin. But the reason I think it's not a Kevin Feige decision is because he hasn't touched upon that since. And after the collapse of the creative committee, we haven't heard any word about that front.
Yeah, even though I love Iron Man 3. It's one of my favorite MCU movies. It's in my top 5. I'm just, we'll probably get to final lists near the end, but it's way up there.
Yeah.
But like, I'm also okay with them doing the Mandarin for realsies in the future. And with the whole, MCU kind of thing, if it is a whole universe, I'm okay with them setting up things and never cashing them in because we think that maybe one day in the future they might.
Right.
Like, I'm actually okay with the leader not being a thing. Because, like, hey, he's out there. Yeah, there's, like, a comic that says that he's in prison, but, like, I
don't think, really, those shits aren't canon, really.
Like,
that's Ike stuff. That's under Ike. Kevin is like, I don't care about you.
Exactly. Like, they're canon until they're not.
Yeah.
Is generally the like, I remember David Goyer said that a comic or Zack Snyder said that a comic that David Goyer wrote for Man of Steel, which was canon, is not canon.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, like, canon is just a marketing tool now.
Yeah.
It's whatever's in the movies,
which I think is gonna happen with the Netflix shows in the future. It's canon, but I think the days are numbers of the days of Netflix shows being canon are numbered.
Yeah, it's currently canon until something pops up to contradict it. Unless those characters pop up in a movie.
Yeah.
Then they're canon until they come up with something better.
It might even be numbered with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to be honest, but I think Kevin has a lot more tolerance for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. than the other shows, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, I think we mentioned this before, but my dream is for the final season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to be a crossover with the Defenders.
Yeah, I hope that happens.
Like, especially since all those shows are canceled, and they're like, oh, well, we'd love to do crossovers, but, the shows are all in development now.
Yeah.
It's like, well, now they're not. So season 7... Not 6, because they didn't have enough time.
Yeah. But
season 7 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is just all those Netflix guys getting together. I want to see Ghost Rider and Punisher back to back shooting whatevers.
That would be awesome. All right. So then we get on to the next movie, which I believe I would say is the true beginning of Phase 2, despite what Kevin says, which is
absolutely
Thor: The Dark World. Now, this movie has went through different creative hands. Again, mentioned Patty Jenkins was originally supposed to direct this movie, which was handpicked by Natalie Portman, by the way, and that's what soured the whole relationship with Natalie Portman. When she found out pretty late in the game that she was replaced with Alan Taylor. But I think before Alan Taylor jumped on, I think Michelle MacLaren, another Game of Thrones alum, was in the mix to take this on. But it eventually went to Alan Taylor, which they thought again would have been a perfect mix, considering that, you know, Game of Thrones, he directed a lot, some of the best episodes of Game of Thrones, and he wanted, you know, bring that aesthetic to Thor. But one of the things that held that movie down was that it was heavily edited after he was finished with it. A lot of subplots that you even saw in the trailers just never made it to the final film. Which
like
were,
what?
Like the whole thing with Lady Sif and Jane Foster. You know, her being
Do they fight?
No, she just kind of felt a little bit jealous because, you know, she's in love with Thor. And
Who isn't? Have you seen his eyebrows? They're not blonde anymore.
Right? But, you know, it was heavily edited. But one thing I can definitely say about this movie is, I mean, and I think they probably had more Malekith in it, but that was pared down a lot, I guess. Because how you get, what's his name? Doctor Who guy?
Christopher Eccleston.
Eccleston, you know.
Eccleston,
yeah.
something like that.
How do you get him in your movie and just don't do anything with him, right? You know,
He could have been played by a stuntman. It wouldn't have made a difference. And that's not to say that stuntman can't act. It could have been played by someone with no gravitas.
Heck, a stuntman was the first person to play Thanos in Avengers, and that stuntman made an appearance in Civil War.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Who did he play?
The black guy that was in the Rumlow's team in the beginning of Civil War. He was the one who had the virus. It's like, drop the gun or drop. You know, that was Thanos, the original Thanos.
Ah, that's fun.
Yeah.
I mentioned this on the Phase 1 episode, and we've mentioned it on the show before. But in that scene, the post-credit scene of the Avengers, when Thanos shows up, I didn't know who Thanos was.
Right.
And I saw it at a press screening like a week before the movie came out. They didn't have the shawarma scene yet.
Yeah.
They literally hadn't even shot it yet.
Yeah.
But when I saw that guy, and I was like, who the hell is that? And like people were coming out of the theater being like, is that Darkseid? Oh, it's Darkseid. And I was like, I don't know who it is, but like I know it's not Darkseid because he's DC. But I thought it was like just like a placeholder image, and I thought it was going to be Red Skull. I was like, oh, it's Red Skull. He survived. He's going to be back one day. And I was right. He was in an Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Just not that one.
Yeah. So yeah, Thor: The Dark World, and Thor, it basically was our intro. Even though we saw the scepter in Avengers 1, and we saw the Tesseract in Captain America, we didn't know that they were Infinity Stones until later on. So this was our introduction to the world of Infinity Stones with the Ether, and it was mentioned by Odin when he talked about it's the one of the 6 Infinity Stones, and when he was
like that's the first time they used the phrase, right?
Yeah. So this is sort of like, because Kevin Feige says these 22 film arc is called the Infinity Saga. This is where the Infinity Saga really picks up steam, where it's about these stones and what they can do. Yes, I mean, it felt like an episode of the MCU, just wasn't really a game changer in terms of like affecting the MCU in a whole, kind of like what Captain America did or any of the Avengers movies did, but it was a solid episode in the MCU franchise.
Yeah, it's a thing where we get mad at movies that distract from the main narrative to build up other stuff.
Right.
But we also get mad at movies that are their own thing and don't have any connective tissue.
Right.
And this movie weirdly does both.
Yeah.
And it was really funny listening to the director's commentary on that, because it was with Kevin Feige. And Kevin Feige doesn't say anything interesting in that whole commentary track. Instead, he's like, and see, this is the first time we mentioned Infinity Stones, and that's going to be super important in 5 years. and he just does that over and over. See, this is Sif, and in the comics, she's this and this, but here she's this. And it's like, you're not giving us any insight into the movie. You're just being like, you're just doing legwork.
Yeah, yep.
For like the greater franchise. And you're the person who comes out all the time and says, we're just trying to make the best movie we can right now. And I don't think that he was in this movie.
Yeah.
I think it's a miracle that the movie turned out as good as it did, because I really like that. It's my favorite Star Wars prequel. That's the way that, like, I see that movie.
Right.
Not like in that it's like... First of all, Asgard reminds me much more of Naboo than of Game of Thrones.
Right.
And it's got Natalie Portman, which I didn't even think about until just now. But just that aesthetic, it feels very Star Wars prequel-y. And I just love how jokey it is and silly. I honestly think that Thor Ragnarok is a little too funny.
Right. Yeah, because when we first heard that we were making Ragnarok and that it will do what Winter Soldier did for the MCU, we kind of thought it was going to be a serious movie, Ragnarok.
And apparently, like, both of these movies, The Dark World and Ragnarok, had the same editing process.
Right.
Where like, people came out, Taika Waititi came out and Alan Taylor came out before the movies came out, and they said, we had a movie and we shot a lot of jokes, and until the last minute, we didn't have a lot of the jokes in it. And then at the last minute, we decided, let's just put all the jokes in it.
Right.
All the jokes every joke that we had cut, let's just put it in there. So, like, it added something like 40 minutes to Ragnarok.
Right.
Like, they said that was like a 100-minute movie when it first.
Yeah, I remember hearing Taika saying that it was around that, right? And I was like, yeah, and then I was kind of like, why do they always do that to the Thor films? Make them the shortest movies in the MCU, right? And then when I found out it was, 2 hours and change, I think what it ended up being, I was like, wow, okay. I thought they were going for a shorter movie. All right, whatever,
Yeah, and Thor: The Dark World, I think, is one of the shortest.
Yeah, it's hour and 40 minutes, I think it is, or hour and 45, around
something
that.
Like
yeah.
But it also, kind of like Thor Ragnarok, does great juxtapositions of really funny scenes with, like, genuine emotional moments.
Yeah.
Usually with, like, those movies' Secret Weapon, just the relationship between Thor and Loki.
Right.
Like, I thought that he died.
I
thought, they got him. I thought that he betrayed him. Then I thought he died.
That was the original plan too. That he was gonna die in that one, and it was a last-minute decision to make him be Odin at the end. That was a last-minute decision. And I think that's a whole creative committee thing too that changed that whole aspect of it. So yeah, creative committee was definitely at hand with some of these early Phase 2 movies.
He would have been a lot, I think, like, kind of just looking at the narrative arcs, that would have made Thor a lot darker, a lot faster. He would have been where he was in Infinity War.
Yeah.
Right at the end of The Dark World, because that's where his mother dies.
Yep.
To lose her and Loki at the same time. Oh, boy.
So, now, I think that's the gist of Thor: The Dark World. Still on the creative committee, got a lot of heavy editing pre-release, and then a lot of people enjoyed it, but it was one of the lesser reviewed films in the MCU. Yep. But then now we take a step to one of the best films in the MCU, and I think this is still number one for a lot of people, and it's such a contrast with the first Avenger, Captain America, the first Avenger. We have Captain America, the Winter Soldier, a movie that a lot of comic book fans were looking forward to, especially when we saw Bucky Barnes and him sort of falling to his death in the first Avengers. There's a comic book fan who had non-comic book fans attend. He's like, oh, wait till you see that guy, you think he's dead. Oh, wait, right? And then here comes the Winter Soldier, and this is the first film, the MCU film by the Russos, Joe and Anthony, who came from television. Arrested Development, Happy Endings, which I loved.
Woo!
Community, right?
Yep.
And I think the movie that they did, which I don't remember if I saw, maybe I saw it one time, I just don't remember it. You, Me, and Dupree. I've never seen that movie, or maybe I saw it, just haven't remembered it. I think Owen Wilson is in that movie. I'm not sure.
And Matt Dillon?
I think so. Yeah, came from television, came from comedy, and here they are directing a 70s political thriller. And to put the icing on the cake, they got Robert Redford, who is sort of known for that. Was he in 3 Days in Con?
I'm not sure. He's definitely in All the President's Men.
Oh, right. And, of course, he was in Spy Games with Brad Pitt, who I always thought Brad Pitt looked like a younger Robert Redford. And the fact that they have the two of them in the movie, I was like, oh, great minds, great minds. But, yeah, this movie, as a matter of fact, it just, if you look at all the MCU film, maybe you could say Iron Man comes close to it in terms of tone. But this movie's, the tonal shift was so drastic, so gritty and realistic. You know, there were hardly any jokes in it. You know, the opening scene on the tanker, I still to this day think of Metal Gear every time I watch that. It was like, holy shit, that's Metal Gear right there.
That shot of Cap mule kicking the guy and he flies 10 feet and then falls off the side.
Yeah.
It's like, that gets like this giddy, visceral reaction from me every single time where I'm like, God damn, that's cool.
Right. So this is a movie that turned the MCU on its head. You know, for ever since the first Iron Man, SHIELD has been sort of the overseer, protector of everything. And then the big revelation in this movie is that SHIELD was infiltrated by Hydra back in the 40s after they got Armin Zola to switch sides with them. Well, no, he didn't switch sides. He just grew Hydra within to the point now they were ready for control. And hearing Robert Redford say Hail Hydra is like, holy shit, you got the great Robert Redford to say Hail Hydra. This, I think, was the start of getting big names. I'm trying to think if they had like a big name legendary actor. I mean,
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, and I guess to some extent Sam Jackson. But Sam Jackson takes anything.
He does. If you can afford him, he'll even do Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, Clark Gregg. That was too personal. I apologize.
But yeah, I guess Anthony was the start. But then, really, once you got but then Anthony, he takes anything too. I mean, Mission Impossible 2, he just took like a walk-on role on that. So I think Robert would be the sort of equivalent of getting someone like Daniel Day-Lewis or something to do your movie. Imagine if the MCU got Daniel Day-Lewis. That would have been like it's over. It's fair game with any actor. If you got Daniel Day-Lewis.
He would demand that they make an actual working Iron Man suit.
Yeah, so I can play method against him. But yeah, so the Winter Soldier, you know, the big reveal, Hydra is SHIELD, and Cap has to take down both SHIELD and Hydra, and there's no more sort of security World Council force leading America, which leads to sort of Avengers being that primary protector of the realm, which we'll get to in Age of Ultron and subsequently Civil War. But yeah, like that movie, the music by Henry Jackman too. as well was just amazing. Like I just love that soundtrack. It's right up there with Alan Silvestri for the Avengers soundtrack. I just love it. I have it at number. Sometimes it switches between number 4 and 5 for me. You know, it trades place with Avengers 1 and between with 4 and 5. Sometimes Avengers is number 4. Sometimes Winter Soldier is number 4. Depending on my mood, it's like, you know what, Winter Soldier is better. No, but that Avengers though, that was awesome. But yeah, what do you think of Winter Soldier?
Oh, it's great. I mean, that casting is perfect. Seeing it's a thing that we take for granted. Even like I haven't read that much. I've read more than I have when we started recording. All those ages ago.
Right.
But I haven't read, you know, every friggin' comic out there. But like, I also follow the trades, so I knew that, you know, that Sebastian Stan was back as Bucky, and I knew that the Winter Soldier was Bucky. But when I saw the movie for the second time in theaters, I was sitting like in front of, or about, I think they were a row behind me. A group of like teenage girls who were watching the movie.
Right.
And when the mask comes off and they show his face, they all went like, "Oh, what? No, my God!" And I was like, "That's cool."
I think that hiding that fact would have been difficult for the movie, considering that the source material that it's based on is pretty much out there for anyone to find out. That's one. Two is that they wanted Sebastian Stan to promote the movie as well, right? You know, you can't, you know, he's in the movie a lot. It's kind of like I have an idea if they do bring back Killmonger for Black Panther 2, that they'll reveal that earlier on, and to have Michael B. Jordan do press for the movie. You know what I mean? You know, they could keep that a secret, but it's like you lose Michael B. doing press. Or rather, something earlier, like Superman shows up at the end of Justice League, but you had him do press for the movie saying, "Is Superman in the movie?" I don't know. It's like so dumb, right? It's
right,
like,
yeah.
So it's one of those situations where you kind of had to make it known. I mean, they didn't. That's the funny thing about it, right? They made it known without making it known that he is playing the Winter Soldier. They didn't overtly say, "Oh yeah, he is the Winter Soldier," but they didn't try to hide it. If someone happens to ask about it, they answer the questions. They don't play coy about it. But you know, it's just one of those things where it would have been difficult to sort of keep under wraps. Yeah. What were you saying?
You know, but all of that marketing stuff only applies if you're a person who, you know, follows that stuff.
Right.
There's so many people who like movies and like really like watching movies, but who don't like.
Yeah.
They never go on IMDb.
Yeah.
They never go on Screen Rant. They never go on other sites that aren't Screen Rant. And sometimes I'm very like envious of that, because my favorite thing is going into a movie blind.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I dream about the day that there will be a generation that doesn't remember the commercials for Thor Ragnarok that showed the Hulk showing up.
I mean, I think the only studio that's pulling that off right now is Disney. I mean, the content that we've seen so far of Endgame is not. It's a 3-hour movie, and apparently it's not even. It doesn't even scratch the surface of the things we'll end up seeing in that movie. So, you know, I think they're managing to sort of bring back the old adage of being surprised in a movie, which I appreciate. But it's getting harder and harder. But I think Winter Soldier came out a little bit earlier in the MCU's life to sort of get some people surprised that, oh, the Winter Soldier is Bucky, right? You know, the MCU, as much as Avengers, the first Avengers did well, it's still early on, you know, for people to still catch up on MCU movie and be caught surprised by, you know, not following it so detailed.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the tone of Phase 2.
Right.
And how it's very different from Phase 1. Phase one, even with Thor and the Avengers, there is a very consistent tone between those movies.
Right.
Um, there are jokes, but they are not comedies.
Mm-hmm.
They're action movies with, broad appeal.
Mm-hmm.
But the language is very not narrow, but
Right.
You recognize them without
Mm-hmm.
even looking,
Mm-hmm.
or just by looking.
Mm-hmm.
In phase two, just going from Iron Man 3 to Winter Soldier, they're both, on the earthbound side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And those tones are so different. Winter Soldier still has jokes,
Mm-hmm.
but is much more serious.
Right.
Whereas, um, Iron Man 3 is almost the first time in the series, kind of where we're getting at in phase 3 now, where the tone is dictated by the director.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they say, yeah, it's still the real world, but we're gonna let you have artistic freedom here.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have to fight the creative committee, but if you can win those fights, you can make whatever movie you want.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was Robert Downey Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing what Kevin Feige should have been doing,
Yeah.
which is telling, and kind of in some ways what Kevin Feige did in phase one, which was saying to Jon Favreau, do your movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just do your movie. We'll deal with anything later.
Yeah. And when the Russos were asked during, when they were doing press, if they were ever affected by the creative committee with the Winter Soldier, they said, no, we worked well with them. They never, during any of the films, they never had any sort of like back and forth with the creative committee. And
Not until Civil War, right?
Well, Civil War is the one that really broke, because
it was the idea. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But was the idea? Well, I guess we'll get to it in phase 3. But the creative committee said this, and the Russos were just like, "No, we're not going to back down."
No. It was really what happened was they wanted Iron Man in the movie, but it was it would mean they would have to renegotiate with Robert.
Because they didn't want to give him $40 million.
I think
he got for the movie.
Yeah, I think at the time he had just one more movie left, which was another Avengers movie. They didn't want to waste it on a Civil War movie, but they wanted to do Civil War, which Kevin Feige said once they heard that Batman versus Superman was announced, they were like, "Holy shit! Then we can do Civil War then." And he really wanted it to be done, but Ike was like, "No, we can't pay him that." So that's when he went to Alan Horn and Bob Iger and said, "Listen, man, this creative committee stuff, this because Ike is really frugal when it comes to during press, like the food service at the press was just like cheap, their office space was cheap. It was just like he was very frugal about how Marvel spent their cash, and
I mean, which was necessary back in like the earliest days of phase 1, where they were putting all of their money on the line.
Yeah, once Disney sort of bought them, the whole deal with the Merrill Lynch and having to worry about that $500 million thing went out the window. So nothing should be, hamstrung by any kind of creative decision. So that's when Kevin said, "Listen, can I just answer directly to you guys and just separate Marvel Studio from Marvel Entertainment?" And which eventually happened. And so, yeah, the Russos weren't affected necessarily with Civil War, because by the time they got in front to shoot Civil War, that whole Civil War in Marvel was done. The divide happened officially.
I guess they just got lucky with Winter Soldier and not having any, toe-to-toe battles.
And another director
that we know of.
Yeah, another director that wasn't affected by the creative committee was James Gunn, as we jump to Guardians of the Galaxy. As a matter of fact, he was so mindful of the creative committee that he wrote a very safe draft the first time. And the only sort of weird aspect to his script was that scene when the Guardians were discussing that 10% of a plan situation. That was the only scene that he had. Yeah.
Well.
That was the only scene that had that sort of Guardians of the Galaxy flavor to it. And Kevin went to him and said, "Wait a minute, like, I need the movie to be more like this scene." And he's like, "Wait, really? I thought you guys were trying to play it safe here." It's like, "Nah, man, go do you." But I can definitely see where the creative committee came in, and that's because Thanos was injected in this movie. Granted, he didn't overstay his welcome, but that was our first introduction to Josh Brolin as Thanos.
Yep.
And he was purple in this one, or
It was a lot more purple.
Yeah.
It was a deeper purple than he eventually wound up being.
Yeah, right.
It was lighting. It was different lighting.
That's what I'm saying.
That was it. That was exactly it.
I could see them explaining that's what it is, because he was on his chair. He was in deep space. So yeah, it's lighting.
That'd be so good if in Endgame, like, there's a scene where he goes back there for whatever reason, and he just walks, and the lighting is just different, and he's like, "Huh, this lighting makes me look fat," or something.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think this is before they even, when they sort of had the idea that Thanos would be the sort of the be all end all villain. At this point, I don't believe they even had the idea that he would be some sort of eco-terrorist. They just didn't know where they were going to go with the character. So if you watch this version of Thanos against the Infinity War Thanos, there's a lot different aspect to it. Like, in this one is a lot more mustache twirly villain, like, "I'll bathe the stars with your blood." It's like, he doesn't talk like that now. I mean, he's still poetic, but he's more like, "It has to be done. I'm the only one who can balance everything, and I hope they remember you, Stark." It's a lot more sort of, honor amongst warriors type of speech versus.
I think he's legitimately threatened by Ronan.
Right.
In that scene, because he's thinking, "Oh shit. Ronan has a power stone now, and he actually might be able to kill me because I don't have any stones. Because I'm just sitting around in my chair.
Yeah.
Because no one's written what I'm supposed to be doing, so I'm just going to stay here until someone decides to do something with me."
And to see how far it's come, because a lot of people were making jokes, because that movie came out in 2014. 2014 was Guardians. We wouldn't get to see Thanos fully until 2018. So for 4 years, a lot of people were talking about, "Oh yeah, he's just in a chair. What is this?
Team Thor."
It was like, what is this guy in his chair?
It's one of the jokes in Team Thor.
Yeah.
That short Thanos. He likes to sit in his chair.
But yeah, James Gunn managed to. Granted, he had a co-writer as well in Nicole Perlman, I think, co-wrote it. But there's a lot of Gunn-isms in this film.
Yeah, I would love to know, like, what
she contributed.
Yeah, because he's a solo writer on Guardians too.
Yeah, he is.
And I'd love to know, what's him and what's her in part 2, like, who created the tone.
Yeah.
Of that. But I guess, I don't really know how that writing process works. If they write together, if they bring stuff separately and then mash it together. I don't know.
Yeah.
But one thing I really like about Guardians, other than, like, friggin' everything, love that movie, is that scene where they do the Thor the Dark World stuff. With the Collector.
Oh, right.
This is what the Infinity Stones are.
Yeah.
And, reiterating for the audience, because you have to reiterate before they realize it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And Rocket is just like, "Shut up!
Yeah.
I don't care."
It's like, "That's great for you, White." It's like,
yeah,
I'm happy. It's like, what?
Right, because he has his own inflections.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that has nothing to do with this movie, so shut up.
Yeah. Just give me my credits already.
That's I can't believe they let that slide.
Yeah. But yeah, Guardians was my favorite film of the MCU until Avengers Infinity War. But, like, for a long time, that was my favorite movie. I could watch it anytime.
And it just going back to, that whole, "Oh, this is important."
Mm-hmm.
The Infinity Stones are important. It's just like setting a movie at Christmas. The things you think are important aren't that important.
Yeah, and regardless of the whole Thanos appearance and the Infinity Stone info drop, I still think Guardians is a standalone movie that you could watch without ever seeing any movie prior to it or before. Kind of like you know what it would be like watching episode 1, you know, Phantom Menace. The Emperor is, or Darth Sidious is in it, but I think that movie had a beginning, middle, and end with the bad guy getting defeated, Darth Maul getting defeated, and the resolution of the whole tax trade federation shit getting resolved. So
That was such a mess.
but Guardians had the whole Ronin situation, and they were you know, resolved that. So I think I see Thanos like this sort of Emperor-esque, where yes, he's the bad guy of the bad guys, but really we not, you know, we don't care about him too much because we have a more pressing situation going on here. So that's why I loved Guardians so much. It being in phase 2 after so many films came before it, that I could just put Guardians on for anyone, and it had such a different flavor, much like Winter Soldier had its own different flavor to it. But I think the difference is Winter Soldier, kind of like Terminator 2, kind of like Godfather Part 2, really needs the first one to really sell the idea that this movie is so different. You know what I mean? It really builds on the movies before it. Like, you won't get the impact of the Hydra reveal if you didn't see the Hydra in the first Avengers, or in Captain America: The First Avenger, or see Cap deal with the present in Avengers. So, or the Battle of New York, how that affected the whole Project Insight, right? So, but this movie really didn't need any other movie before it to really be a standalone in phase 2, you know, and that's why I really appreciated that film. So yeah, it was my favorite film. I love the characters, Peter Quill. I like the whole fact of him sort of being this womanizer that, you know, sleeps with different alien races. It's like
He never grew up.
he was like, what's Barit. Oh, Barit. To be honest, I forgot you were here. it was like what? And then the beginnings of his relationship with Gamora, that he saw her as beautiful, but she will not fall for his pelvic sorcery.
Right.
Rocket, which is Bradley Cooper, which is unlike he's ever sounded like, you know.
He is amazing in that.
Yeah, and it's
Rocket is the soul of the whole MCU.
And it's funny that Bradley doesn't do press for any of the movies. This is weird, right? You never see him on the press run for any of them. Any of the Guardians, he's never on the press run for event. Like, he's gonna be a big part of Avengers Endgame, and he's not on press run.
He's the only one left.
Right?
Guardians 3 is gonna be a solo show.
Right? So no, it's like they're all coming back. But anyway, so yeah, Guardians. I love the coming together of all these sort of disparate characters. You know, Drax the Destroyer, Drax getting Dave Bautista getting his sort of big first major role. You know, that's why he's so loyal to James Gunn. We'll get to the whole Disney firing thing.
Oh, we will get there
in phase 3, but you know, he was really loyal, and because he got this role, and that was his stepping stone to become Dave Bautista, the actor, or not Dave Bautista, the wrestler. So yeah, it was a great movie. I just enjoyed it. It's very funny. The music in it, I'm sure, as you being a music connoisseur, you appreciated the songs in it.
Oh yeah, some great tunes in there.
What's
great 70s AM
yeah
style is a really fun, underrated, underappreciated, because it's so much of it is just dismissed as corny.
Yeah, I remember you were saying something. There's a song in it that was Hooked on a Feeling from Blue Swede, or was it a remake of another song?
It was a remake of another song.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a remake of Hooked on a Feeling from like '69, maybe.
Right.
I forget who did it, but it is a cover. Yeah.
Right.
But that version is like more well known
Right.
because of the hookah chakas.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the music in it, Jackson 5 in it. What other well
David
known?
Bowie,
Yeah.
Raspberries.
Who the opening song? Hey, what's
So
the
good.
matter? Who's that? Who's singing that?
Rathbone.
I guess.
I believe that's
Come and
the
get
name.
your love.
Mhm.
I just
So good. Like that 70s AM style is the most racially neutral music
Right.
where you can Rathbone, white guys.
Yeah.
The guys who do Brandy, white guys. Oh, that's Guardians too. But like, there's so when I was looking up, those bands when I was getting into like 70s AM style,
Mm-hmm.
was like, I can't tell if these people are black or white. And I was like, the 70s rocked for that reason.
Right.
It's the closest we got
Yeah.
to actual racial unity.
Yeah. So
70s AM music.
yeah, so it all meshed well, written by and directed by James Gunn. And then we move on to Joss Whedon's second film that broke him.
It broke him.
It broke to the point where I think a lot of people who went to the set visit saw a ragged Joss Whedon, who basically, he's usually witty when he's answering questions. He just said, "Yo, man, I'm just lucky if I got the shot." So this was like really the tug of war with Kevin, the creative committee, with ideas that Joss really wanted. So it's like a mixture of all three entities in one film, where each of them had their own idea of what they wanted Age of Ultron to be. Ultron was a villain that Joss wanted to do from the start. Like, he just said, "Okay, you're giving me the first one to do. All I know is the second movie, Ultron has to be the bad guy." He said it from the beginning, and this was his chance to get to do Ultron. And of course, he had to change the backstory of Ultron because in the comics, Hank Pym created Ultron, but Hank Pym hasn't been introduced yet. So naturally, Tony Stark is the one who creates Ultron. Tony Stark with the help of Banner.
And the Mind Stone.
And the Mind Stone. So this movie fell under the same kind of scrutiny that Iron Man 2 fell under, where it was a lot of building. Like, this movie had to not only tell its story, but he had to foreshadow Thor Ragnarok. He had to foreshadow Infinity War. And right before this movie was released, Kevin Feige did the whole big reveal of what Phase 3 was going to be like, which he said he will never do again because it just took away the steam from Age of Ultron because everybody was just looking forward to Infinity War.
Yep. And Civil War even.
And Civil War.
Like that great scene in the farmhouse where they're cutting wood.
Yeah. It was,
that is the some of the seeds of
Yeah,
Civil War.
right.
But like with that announcement having been made before you've seen this movie,
Yep.
it's like it feels so unsubtle.
Yeah. Yep.
Even though that shot of Cap ripping the log in half is like is perfect. It's
Yeah.
a perfect shot.
Uh-huh.
You're just kind of like, ooh, they're doing Civil War next.
Yeah. Right.
Instead of this is so good for this movie.
Yeah.
They're fighting because of Ultron.
Right.
He's got them all at each other's throats, and for legitimate reason.
Mm-hmm. And granted, I would say it is the weakest of all the Avengers films, but looking back at it, because I rewatched it recently and a couple of months before that too, and I remember saying this, regardless of it being weak, just the sheer epicness of it all, like the set pieces, I could see why Joss got broken down because a lot of it was so fast moving. There's about, I want to say, 6 action scenes in this movie. There's a lot more than your typical action movie in it, and it manages to still be character driven as well. It's like it was just juggling a lot of it was being, that he had to really juggle, giving each character their just due while sort of making sure the villain is I mean, a lot of people don't put Ultron up there when it comes to their top villains of the MCU, but I enjoyed what James Spader did.
He's on my list.
Yeah, like I really
not just because I love James Spader.
Yeah,
Boston Legal.
Yeah,
like
top 5. James Spader was the perfect person to play. When I heard he was cast as Ultron, I was like
not to go on a tangent, but I've been rewatching Boston Legal because it's on Hulu now.
Right.
I just finished the first season, and it has been amazing to see how much that show has influenced my development as a human being, for better or for worse. Because I used to watch that show religiously when it was first on, and like I see like things that I say in that show, and just the way it has shaped my mind, I didn't even know until I was rewatching it, and I was like, "Oh my God, what has happened to me?" Like I would be a different person if I hadn't watched that show.
Yeah,
but James Spader is so good. I mean, I think the motion capture cannot be undervalued. They say, the de-aging effects are like the big thing, but that's all part of motion capture.
Yeah.
Performance capture. And like James Spader, yes, it does not make sense that a robot has lips. Whatever. But like it looks like you can see James Spader in that performance. Not even when he's not speaking, you can see him.
Yeah,
it's him.
I loved what he did with the character, and that was not a weak point to me at all. I know some people were disappointed. They thought, especially if you watch the trailer, Ultron sounds like a sort of like menacing thing, and then I guess they got this jokey dude. But considering he's that kind of jokey in the comic book as well, and he does take off of Hank Pym, which is Hank Pym in the comics is a jokey dude, except when he's beating women. But
they liked him. Right, because the trailer was like that first scene where he was like one of those busted Iron Man robots.
Yeah, and his thing was like
his voice was much more gravelly.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there's no strings on me, whatever.
Right.
But
which is still like it's still a part of the movie.
Yeah, he's menacing.
Yeah,
he's menacing. He's just very sarcastic,
especially when he's himself and he gets his new body, and the reveal is him just tearing through his old body.
Yeah.
That's a very effective scene.
So I enjoyed this movie. Why I even enjoyed it more too, and I think a lot of people might go back if they do a rewatch, especially going off of the things that came after it. I think they're going to appreciate the movie a lot more, considering how many seeds not just the Infinity War stuff, but Wakanda, especially how big Black Panther became. Is like
Wakanada.
Wakanda, you got introduced to Claw, and the Circus's Claw.
Yep.
A lot of seed planting was in that movie. And I really dug it, man. Like, and I'm surprised. I give a lot of credit to what Joss was able to juggle. Like, he wanted the farm scene, and I think Kevin wanted more focus on the Thor scene in the fountain. And I guess there was a give and take, like which one had to go or something like that.
And he held the line, and like the farm stuff is some of the best stuff. Like there's still some people who think that it's silly, but I think it works so well.
Look how it's paying off in Endgame. Like as soon as people saw that trailer with him training his daughter, they're like, "Oh no!" They're already crying, and they haven't seen the movie yet. That's because it was established that he's a family man in Age of Ultron. You know what I mean?
The rest of them are gone.
Especially how they even touch upon it a little bit in Civil War, where it's like, oh, you came out of retirement. What, what's up? I'm sure the wife is not happy that you did that or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's like all of that is, it's seeded because of what Whedon did with the Hawkeye character. And of course it also, because everybody thought Hawkeye was going to be the one that died, because every time Joss does a big project, he kills off a major character, right?
Yeah.
So he was definitely seeding that Hawkeye was going to die, or like, I'm coming back to you after I'm gonna retire after this. It was like, oh shit, this motherfucker is about to die, isn't he? But no, he didn't. Quicksilver gave his life.
I mean, and that's like what the Avengers is all about. It's about these going back to a completely non-MCU movie, and not a particularly good movie, but X-Men Apocalypse.
Right.
The best scene in that movie, aside from Quicksilver, anything with Quicksilver, oh my God, Quicksilver, is when he's in Professor X's brain and they're fighting, and he's like, tell them to surrender or whatever, and he says, mutants, hear me, the weak, you must protect them, and like that's just the central theme of any superhero story ever. Is the superheroes are the superpowered people who protect the weak, and the supervillains are the superpowered people who seek to subjugate the weak or kill the weak. And Hawkeye, love Hawkeye, he's weak. He's a normal guy. He's a regular person who happens to have really good geometry skills. But Quicksilver is a superpowered person who becomes a superhero when he decides to use his powers to protect and sacrifice himself for this weak flesh bag. Right. Who will then one day grow up to have a shitty Cable haircut. It's a conspiracy. Cable, then he's bald. He just takes his hair. He's like, oh, now I'm Cable.
And
short on the sides.
So there was Man of Steel that came out a couple years before, which a lot of people criticized the whole Battle of Metropolis thing, where it's like, damn, they really didn't care. They're killing people left and right.
Yeah.
And then I know one of the things that they commended Age of Ultron while they were fighting in Sokovia was how they dealt with the collateral damage, how the Avengers was really trying to save as much people as they can. There was tons of shots dedicated to them rescuing stragglers, and of course when the helicarrier comes up, courtesy of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., if anybody watch that, the helicarrier comes up,
in the tub,
and sends the lifeboat for the survivors. It really sells that the Avengers are here to save people. But yeah, I love that movie so much. Again, it's the weaker of the Avengers films. It's not even in my top 5, but I appreciate the work that Joss put into the film.
Yeah, definitely. I think its biggest strength and biggest weakness is how much work Joss put into the film. I think that script is so dense that it's impossible to get it all in one viewing.
Right.
I think you watch the movie and you're like, I like that, I didn't like that, but like the whole thing just kind of washed over you.
Yeah.
I think that if you watch it once, you don't have the best impression. I think if you watch it 2 or 3 or 4 times, then it really sinks in and you're like, oh wow, there is so much meat on these bones.
Yeah, it is. Like, I think at the time when I saw it in theaters, it was with my ex-girlfriend at the time, my girlfriend at the time. She didn't like it. She didn't like it as much. She felt it was just going on from scene to scene, and it never felt as sort of stakesy, it didn't grab her as much because it was just like action scenes. But again, if you do rewatch and then put it in context of where the other movies went and where the movies before it started, there's a lot to it.
Like every line of dialogue serves those characters,
right? But yeah, it was the only drawback I would say too, is the score by Brian Tyler and Danny Elfman. They didn't get Alan Silvestri to come back, so they tried to get the Avengers theme as much as possible, but if you listen to the score of that, it's not there. It's like halfway, so it's not as iconic, So this movie kind of held back the Alan Silvestri score from becoming as iconic as it is now. Like there's a lot of right now. It's like the theme that people are like, holy shit, is iconic now. But I think with this movie, it's because it wasn't used. It took a step back. Right, so then we can go to our final film in the Phase 2, which I guess at the time it felt a little bit weird because it's like you went from big Avengers and you're going to end Phase 2 with this small, pun intended, character. So yeah, it's Ant-Man, which was originally supposed to be directed by Edgar Wright. He still got story credit. He left... I think this thing was supposed to be 2 months into production before it went to production. He left like 2 months before, and they had to like scrounge up to find a director, and then they found Peyton Reed. They got
that must have taken friggin' balls from Edgar Wright working on this movie for so long. But I guess, and they do say that so much of what wound up in the movie is from him.
Yeah, I think
so much of the pre-production work and like the action scenes, especially, are his.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what took the most time.
Yeah,
and it's why that $130 million movie looks like, the scale of the ones that they spend $200 million on.
Right.
It's why like the special effects most of the time are better than the ones in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah, I think the whole Lewis thing was probably him too, right? I mean, it feels like something Edgar Wright would do with him.
Maybe.
It feels like something he would do.
It does feel like that, but I would not be surprised if that was Adam McKay.
Yeah, because Adam McKay came in after to do some rewrites. I think even Joe Cornish, who did Attack the Block.
Joe Cornish attached? Did he do something?
I think he did some touch-ups as well.
Because he did The Kid Who Would Be King, which was a huge box office bomb, but I think it's one of the best movies.
I heard it's good. I need to watch it. I heard it was.
It's fantastic. Watch it with your son.
Yeah, but yeah, to see. I think one of the things that stopped Edgar from doing it. Number one, it's his version of Ant-Man was Phase 1 Ant-Man. It was before everything became what it is now. So I think Kevin kind of wanted him to reflect how it is now, the MCU, which he probably just didn't want to do. I wonder what that it is though, because I know the whole Falcon thing was added. That was added after he left. Him facing off with an Avenger. Maybe the Avengers compound thing was also an added thing.
That first scene at the Triskelion
probably
was added later.
Yeah.
And I love that scene, but that's also that's partly because I just love the de-aging effect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is super important. I think it's the future.
But to have Edgar Wright leave the project, I'm still curious. What was it? Like,
I guess he just couldn't play ball, or just I think that he's someone who needs absolute creative control. Right. If not absolute creative control, at least final cut on his films.
Mm-hmm.
I bet he had final cut on every other movie that he made.
Yeah, he did. I mean, the movies he did was. The movies he did were independent. Yeah, go ahead.
I bet he had final cut on Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Probably.
And that was the biggest movie that he had made up to that point. And I bet that he used a lot of the skills that he learned while trying to develop Ant-Man. In what was that? 2011.
Yeah.
And Scott Pilgrim versus the World in my top 20 movies of all time.
Right.
I love it. But I bet they said, yeah, do whatever you want. If we don't like something, we'll change it in editing. That by Phase 2, that was the Marvel way.
Yeah.
And I think that was. It doesn't sound like a line to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't sound like a line to me. But I think that for Edgar Wright, that could be seen as the line. It's all speculation on my part, but
Right.
I think that is something that a director like him, who strives for creative control, would say, whoa, that's not a line that I'm willing to cross.
Yeah. You know, it's one of those things where, just like how I would have loved to see what Edward Norton would have brought to the MCU post Incredible Hulk, I kind of wish we got a chance to see Edgar Wright's Ant-Man. You know, it felt just like how James Gunn had his flavor on Guardians movies, and how to some extent Joss had his Joss Whedonisms to the Avengers movies. I would have loved to have seen you know, Edgar Wright's Ant-Man. It would have been a very much different film for sure than any other film in the MCU. And I think maybe Kevin probably felt it would have been so different. It would have been like, wow, this is not even, this just feels like it just belongs to a whole different universe. Maybe that's what he was going for. Maybe like maybe the film he was making was just so not an MCU movie where it just he probably didn't even mention the Avengers. And I think going forward, I know they probably wanted the quantum realm to be an important factor in the MCU. Like, maybe quantum realm was an added thing too, or did Edgar Wright?
I don't know.
Maybe quantum realm was a thing that was added, and that's something that Kevin wanted, and Edgar was like, what? No. But who knows? And then Edgar Wright said he still hasn't seen the movie. Maybe he's lying now. Maybe he probably seen it at least some point. But I would love to sort of, time has passed by long enough for him to say what his ideas were. Maybe he's still locked under an NDA. I don't know.
The weirdest director commentary ever on that would be Peyton Reed and Edgar Wright just being like, that was mine. That was mine. That was mine.
They should do that,
You messed
right?
up. You ruined my vision. I actually like that part.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know what they should do? Marvel should go and say, you know what? Let's do it for the one once we release everything, all the films, all 3 phases for the box set. Let's just do a commentary for Ant-Man where we have Edgar speak about his experience developing the movie. I mean, he had to get a producer story credit because he worked on it for so long. You know what I mean?
He did. Like, I wonder if like at junkets or stuff, if there's specific rules for Edgar Wright, like, don't ask him about Ant-Man.
Probably.
Like, you are not allowed. We will end the interview immediately. That's like the rule.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably was his baby. It's probably was like a sore subject for him to imagine, like, working on something for so long and someone takes it and changes it up, you know. So it probably is still a sore subject for him, but I hope he can get over it and said, all right, I watched it. Okay, this is mine. This is mine. Oh, that's theirs though.
Hey, maybe he'll come back. He'll do Ant-Man 3.
Right?
Ant-Man and the Wasp and Edgar.
I don't think Ant-Man is getting another movie because the box office on those films aren't as big as the others. Granted,
but it did still go up a little.
I mean, granted, the budgets aren't astronomical for those films either, but
It's true.
Disney is in the business of making blockbusters, not mediocre films.
I think that they're a good palate cleanser.
Uh-huh.
I think that the MCU needs these small stories. They need to bounce back and forth. I think that they they prefer smaller stories. Well, not Disney. Disney doesn't prefer smaller stories like
They want it big.
like Ant-Man, because they like Spider-Man.
Uh-huh.
Because that makes 330 million. Although Sony makes that money.
Funny. What I think,
But
I think the next time you do
crossover,
see,
Spider-Man and Ant-Man.
well, I think
Insect Boys.
I think the next time you see Ant-Man and the Wasp, solo, because you might see them in a team-up movie, but I think further adventures of them would probably be on a Disney Plus show, kind of like how Falcon and Winter Soldier getting their show, WandaVision and Loki. I think, and it does suit them to be on a Disney Plus show, because a lot of people did skip Ant-Man and the Wasp and Ant-Man. They were like, Ant-Man.
No, they shouldn't have, because it's a good one.
It is good. It is funny and
At
delightful.
the very least, I hope they get to round out the trilogy.
Yeah, that's true, right? Do a third one. But anyway, that's that's
Ant-Man, a very Ant-Man Christmas.
Yeah. All right, so
Directed by Shane Black.
That kind of rounds out phase 2. I guess I can ask the question here instead of waiting for phase 3. Which out of phase 2 films, which one you think is the best or your favorite film in phase 2?
It's really close between Guardians of the Galaxy, Winter Soldier, and Iron Man 3. I think that oh boy. I really do. I like, like I said before, there's no misses for me. Even the ones that are considered lesser, I still adore. Like, I could watch Thor: The Dark World right now and have a great time. I'm gonna have to go with Iron Man 3. I have to go with Iron Man 3 on this one. I love the tone. I love Tony Stark in this movie. I think it's the one where he kind of learns the most since the first one.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes that really altruistic guy that he's kind of been seen as, and he's made grand gestures towards with like his in Avengers he's got the self-sustaining Avenger Tower, or Stark Tower rather, and that's like a big macro moment of saying, hey, I'm a good person, you guys. And Iron Man 3 is one where he like buys all the stuff for the kid after he makes fun of him for having no dad.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's so good.
Like, all the shit. Even had a car in there. Who was the car? Oh, yeah, his mom would drive the car, I guess.
Like, that's like, it's so good because like when the movie was, friggin' internet people, like, oh, or like, oh, of course they have a kid in it because it's Disney now. And it was like, yeah, do you see what he does to that kid? Like, yeah, your dad's dead, so what? Blah, blah, blah.
It was like, oh, we're connected.
Exactly. And it's like, everyone jumps on movies, whether they've seen them or not, based on whatever their preconceptions were, or based on whatever the meme is. Because, like, it's a meme that Iron Man 3 is bad.
Right.
And it's like, why is it bad? Because we're mad about the Mandarin. Well, you could be mad about something and still like something.
Right.
There are movies that I love that there's things in them that I don't like.
Yeah.
It's like, if I disagree with a character's actions, does that mean the movie is bad? It's like, no, I can disagree with a character's actions and love the movie sometimes because of that.
Right.
Like, I love Iron Man 3 for so many reasons, and one of those reasons is that it doesn't do what you wanted it to do with the Mandarin.
Right.
And, like, on any step, every single step with the Mandarin, you want it to do one thing and it does something else.
Right. And
that is something that I think is key to the fact that the MCU has been around for 21 years. Or, excuse me, 21 movies in 10 years.
Yeah.
It will be at some point.
Yeah.
But, just that idea of, oh, we want to see... It's why I get mad when people say, oh, well, you got to read the source material. It's based on this story. It's like, really? Is Civil War based on the Civil War comic? No. Is Iron Man 3 based on Extremis? Is Avengers based on whatever?
Shit, Age of Ultron. There was an Age of Ultron event. Yeah. But it's just in name only. It has... You read the book and watch the movie, it's completely different things.
Exactly. Yeah. And like that's what makes them better. Right. Not better than the source material necessarily, but better as movies.
As movies,
because you think that something's going to happen and it doesn't happen.
Right.
Even like The Walking Dead does that, right? Like, they have scenes, but instead of this person getting killed, it'll be that person getting killed.
Yeah.
And some people get mad about that, but like, it's so important to not know what's gonna happen. Like, everyone, like, okay, so this is the week before Endgame. This is the last chance we have to be like, I wonder what's gonna happen. And there's so many people online who know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Oh, of course, Iron Man and Captain America are gonna die. How do you know that? What do you mean? Of course, you know that. What do you know? You know nothing, Jon Snow. Like whatever you think is gonna happen, probably not gonna happen.
Probably
and if
not.
you think you know what's gonna happen, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
It's my soapbox.
Yeah.
It's my soapbox.
My favorite film out of Phase 2 is clearly Guardians, because it was my favorite film of all until Infinity War, for so long. Like I said, mentioned earlier, it's a movie I could just put on anytime and just watch from start to finish. I enjoyed it. I just love the character. I love the music. I love the special effects. Like, special effects, too. It's like, you're going off of characters that are unknown, right? The attention to detail, the sort of scope that they gave this movie is filled with unknown characters. It's not like I remember when Iron Man 3 was coming out, the whole rumor was that at the end of that movie,
Iron Man in space.
He's gonna go to space, because you need a popular character to sell Guardians, because nobody knows who these people are. So of course, because in the comic books at one point, Tony Stark became a member of the Guardians, so they're like, of course they're gonna need Tony to sell this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they just going back to what we were saying.
Yeah,
people like they take a rumor. Sometimes it's a rumor that they just made up,
right?
But like they justify it with like logic like that of like, oh well, of course they need to have Iron Man in this because they need that, and that's circular logic. Why do they need it? Because they need it. And like they justify it, and they're completely convinced that that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Instead of like, hey, it'd be cool if ... They're like, no, this is absolutely gonna happen because I know.
So yeah,
I know exactly what's gonna happen in Avengers.
Yeah. So they didn't need Tony Stark. They sold the movie purely on the Guardians themselves, and it's just like I said, I'm amazed that Disney finance this movie. Granted, it's still they had to put the Marvel Studios logo. It's kind of like, I guess at this point, when you sell a Pixar movie, it's a Pixar movie. So I think this was the beginning of Marvel saying we're selling Marvel movies instead of just selling a sort of popular hero.
And people didn't believe in it.
Yeah, right.
Like, the trades were all over. I actually have a little bit of inside knowledge on this. Boom, you're gonna get an exclusive Pop Culture Galaxy exclusive. I mean, I guess if I don't say the magazine, it's super easy to find out the magazine. But like, they got one cover for Guardians of the Galaxy,
right?
Like across everything, like across like the big magazines. Maybe they got like, I don't know, Trees Weekly, but for Groot, but no one wanted to book at Men's Fitness. Right. No one wanted to book Batista or Chris Pratt. And my super best friend, who is the booker for that, I told her, I was like, you gotta get Chris Pratt. This movie's gonna be huge. Always bet on Marvel. And she was like, who? The guy from Parks and Rec. The fat guy from Parks and Rec? Yeah, but he's not fat anymore. I'll ask. And so she goes and she went to bat for him, and she was like, no, you don't understand. You have to get him because it's Marvel and it's going to be huge. And they were just like, well, we weren't planning on getting anyone big, so let's just whatever. We'll see. If it fails, it's on you. And it wound up being a very successful cover for them because of how big the movie was. But no one believed it. No one believed in that movie until it opened, and there were, a handful of people that's where Always Bet on Marvel really started.
Yep.
Like, that was the first time since Iron Man 1 that they were like,
Marvel can sell anything.
Let's just do it.
Yeah, right.
Sell.
Yeah, it was just like, and again, it's brand new characters, and if you watch it, I think it almost felt a higher scale than Avengers, the first Avenger movie, and it's like the last battle scene with the very Star Warsy. It's like, this is our MCU Star Wars. You know what I mean? It just, I'm amazed at how they pulled it off, and I'm in love with that movie, and that's why it's number 2. I put Avengers Infinity War number 1 for me, and number 2 is Guardians, and the Guardians are a big part of Infinity War. So
yep.
You know, and a lot of James Gunn influence was in Infinity War because he wrote the scenes for them in that movie, which you can tell. But yeah, I'm Guardians is my favorite out of the Phase 2 films, and Phase 2 was definitely the sort of changing of the guard for Marvel to say we're really gonna go out there with all our films and really focus on our filmmakers. Yes, we still have a responsibility for the general MCU on a whole to make sure that everything is cohesive, but we want our movies to each have their own message, you know, and their own sort of fan base, because this is just unprecedented, right? A franchise within franchise within franchise, right? Guardians is his own franchise. What else? Have you frozen? Okay, good. Guardians is his own franchise. Captain America is his own franchise. Iron Man is his own franchise. Thor is his own franchise, which culminates to the wonderful Thor Ragnarok, which we'll get to in our next episode. And even Ant-Man, as much as it's not the bigger of the franchises within the franchise, you know, it's still its own franchise.
But it's still huge. I mean, Ant-Man and the Wasp made like 500 million.
Yeah, it's more money than a typical other movie. Like if there was an Ant-Man, like say Ant-Man wasn't a character in Marvel Comics and someone wanted to make an Ant-Man movie, oh, let's capitalize on the superhero thing. Oh, we'll just call it Ant-Man. And even if they make it the same way, I mean, obviously the whole Falcon part wouldn't be in it, but like follow the same plot thread, right? Under any other brand, it would have failed.
Oh, maybe.
I mean, it's bolstered by the fact that it's Marvel Studios, Ant-Man.
Absolutely.
Right?
Like there are people who, you know, they were counting on that to be the case with TV, with Netflix.
Right.
But it didn't quite work out that way. But for the movies, because it's not a 13 episode investment every 3 months.
Yeah.
For the movies, you know, if a Marvel movie comes out, and audiences are smart enough to know the difference between Marvel Studios and like X-Men.
Shit. Yeah, I gotta pick up Logan now.
Audiences are smart enough to know the difference between Marvel Studios and X-Men, or Marvel Studios and Sony, that they, you know, they'll go.
Yeah.
They will go, oh, I got to see the next MCU movie.
Yeah. All right, so that'll wrap up everything. So the next thing we're going to talk about is Phase 3, and then after that, oh my god, Avengers Endgame. People are going to be seeing it tonight, actually, which they're so lucky. I'm jealous.
What? Where?
No, it's premiere and... Oh, not... Well... press screenings.
The LA premiere.
Press screenings and stuff like that. Yeah.
I didn't get into one.
But yeah, that brings us to the close of it. So you can find me on the internet. I'm on Twitter at Marky Tundra, on Instagram at Pop Culture Galaxy, and Facebook at Pop Culture Galaxy. Where can they reach you, Zach?
Find me on Twitter at my name, Zach Woshner, and on Instagram.
It is Zach Wosh. Zach Woj.
Oh yeah, it's Zach Woj.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find me.
Yeah.
If you look for me.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Comment down below, let us know what you think.
Ring the bell.
Hit that notification, you know, and all that jazz. So until next time, folks. Peace.
Indeed. Yeah. That's a good one. And it was